In my previous video, I spoke about how we're probably going to see the heaviest 10 times bodyweight total fall within the next year, with the 93s entering into the 930s. Another milestone that I think is going to fall within the next year is the heaviest 11 times bodyweight total, with the 83s joining this exclusive club, totaling 913. So I'm going to go through the 4 lifters who I think can hit this mark pretty soon. But first, let's talk about the history of the 11 times bodyweight total, because in raw tested powerlifting, there have only been 8 lifters to hit this mark. The first of which was Andrzej Stanaszek back in 1993. Now you might be thinking, whoa, what is this? Presser powerlifting talking about pre-2012? Well, yes, back then there was no such thing as raw powerlifting basically. However, this guy competed raw in the majority of the meets that he did, despite everyone else competing equipped. So in 1993 IPF Worlds, he totaled 567.5 in the 52 kilo weight class, crossing the 11 times bodyweight barrier for the first time by a raw tested powerlifter. Also, he was only 21 years old at that time. Now, in the next 10 years, he would go on to cross this threshold 20 times competing raw, which is pretty wild. No one else, obviously back then, no one else was competing raw, so there was no one that was close to this. And the largest multiplier that he ever hit was when he totaled 600 at just over 51 kilos. He did that at 2002 euros, which stood at 11.7 times bodyweight, which still stands today as the largest bodyweight multiplier in raw tested powerlifting. I actually forgot about this guy when I was doing my previous video, and I said Sergey Fedosienko was the first guy to cross 10 times bodyweight. Well, it was actually this guy. But speaking of Fedosienko, he was the second man to cross 11 times bodyweight. At 2012 Russian Nationals, he totaled 650 in the 59s for 11.26. And he would go on to total over the threshold 16 times, the most recent of which was only 2 years ago in 2023. So of course, last time he competed at Asian Championships at the end of last year, we saw his total dip quite a bit. But it was only 2 years ago when he was still able to total over 11 times bodyweight. And his largest multiplier came when he set the IPF world record in 2016 on his way to winning one of his 8 raw world titles, totaling 669.5 for just under 11.5 times bodyweight. Then it was quite a long time before we saw the next person on this list, and that would be, of course, Taylor Atwood. 8 years after Fedosienko did it, in 2020, Taylor Atwood became the first 74 lifter to total over 800 kilos, posting up 812, also crossing the 11 times bodyweight threshold at the same time as the 800 kilo mark. So it was quite a groundbreaking meet. This was done in October 2020. And he would repeat this feat and actually best it at USAPL Raw Nationals in 2021. Of course, we're all familiar with his legendary 838.5 at 74, which stood as this unbreakable record until Austin Perkins broke it just 2 years later. But that stood at just shy of 11.4 times bodyweight. And Taylor Atwood is in fact one of the 83s who I'll be talking about later in this video based on what he's done recently. And the fourth lifter, as I mentioned, is Austin Perkins, who also in 2020 totaled 811 times bodyweight. So he actually did this in November of that year. So only 1 month after Taylor Atwood, he was just behind him in crossing that 800 kilo total and 11 times bodyweight threshold. Now, in the years since, he's actually crossed 11 times bodyweight 7 times, which is the third most behind only Stanaszek and Fedosienko. 7 times going over 11 times bodyweight as a 74 is ridiculous. So obviously 851 is arguably the most impressive raw tested powerlifting performance ever. He did that at just over 74 kilos in the 75 kilo weight class because the USAPL sucks. But that was just shy of 11.5 times bodyweight, which stands as technically the heaviest 11 times bodyweight total we've ever seen, because he actually weighed in slightly over 74 because obviously the weight classes got jumbled up by the USAPL there. And his largest multiplier was just above that at exactly 11.5 times bodyweight when he did that at Worlds. That was Worlds last year when he totaled 836. And that's because he weighed in as a pretty light 74 that day. He was only 72.7. Number 5 happened also at 2023 USAPL Nationals, the same meet where Perk did 851. There were a number of other very impressive performances at this meet, which all got overshadowed by Perk's 851, but one of them was Daniel Clements, who in the 67.5s, again, USAPL, just doing USAPL things, screwing up the sport, but as you know, he was 0.7 kilos over the 66s. He totaled 745.5, over 11 times bodyweight total, and it's worth noting that Taylor Atwood and Perk crossed his threshold as a 74 before any 66s were able to do it. Obviously, Stanaszek was a 52, Fedosienko was a 59, and there was no 66 that was really coming close to this. But Daniel Clements did it, 745.5. Now, unfortunately, Daniel Clements in the years since has kind of been injured, and we saw him, he crossed over to Powerlifting America to compete in the IPF, as all good powerlifters have, right? And unfortunately, well, he still totaled 717.5 at SPD Rally about a year ago, which at the time was the heaviest 66 total. But then he got injured again before he could compete at PA Nats. So unfortunately, we haven't seen him sort of at his best or near this mark since. Hopefully he gets back to that soon though. And Kjell Bakkelund also joined the 11 times bodyweight total club last year. Before he dropped to 66s as a 74, he totaled 815 kilos. It was done about March last year at the Arnold's IPF UK event. And he's done this three times since. Obviously at that meet at 2024 Worlds, when he lost to Perk, he totaled 812.5 as a 73 point something. And then of course his most recent 11 times bodyweight total was done at Sheffield as a 66. So he became technically the first 66 to do this, unless you want to count Daniel Clements, which he kind of was a 66. And this stands as the biggest bodyweight multiplier apart from Stanaszek. So pretty much in the modern day of raw tested powerlifting 2012 onwards, Kjell Bakkelund has the largest bodyweight multiplier of 11.68 with that untouchable 66 world record. He's also the only person to total 11 times bodyweight in 2 weight classes, not just 1. And number 7, Kyota Ushiyama did it at the end of last year when he set the IPF world record at the time of 725 as a 66. Of course, this was done just a few months before Kjell put up his 770. And Kasemsand Senumong also hit this mark at Sheffield, which kind of got overshadowed again by Kjell Bakkelund's insane performance. But Kasemsand weighed in as a light 66, it was only 65 kilos, and he totaled 715 for exactly 11 times bodyweight. So those are the 8 lifters who have done this. And notably, the heaviest out of them was Perk, who was just over 74, but Perk and Taylor as 74 lifters. There's never been an 83 who's done it. But in the next year, I think that's going to change. Let's look at the 83 contenders, and the first of which is the super obvious one, Joseph Borenstein. Now, if I'm being honest, the only reason we're even talking about 913 being a possibility for the 83s is because of Joey B. He's the one that elevated us from the 860s all the way to 900 in a very short period of time, when it took us pretty much half a decade to go from the 840s to 860. That's how much Joey B has advanced the sport, and I think the only reason why the other top 83s in the world are pushing towards 900 as aggressively as they are is because Joey B has given them the belief that it is in fact possible to do. And he's doing it as a junior, no less, who's just still bulking into the 83s, right? So Joey B, 900 kilos, he crossed that mark at PA Nats in April earlier this year, which is only 13 kilos off that magical 11 times bodyweight number. So if you look at his best lifts 305 kilo squat, which he did at that meet at Powerlifting American Nationals, and a 220 kilo bench. So he did this at the start of this year. This is when he posted that crazy 900 SBD day that, absolutely broke the sport of powerlifting. And a 380 kilo deadlift from that same SBD day at the start of this year. This gave him the 900 kilo gym total, which he then later replicated at PA Nats when he put it onto the platform. Now, if you combine all those best lifts that he's done, that gives you 905. right? So he's only about 8 kilos off of that 913 number. And with how fast he's progressing, the rate of progression he's having, I don't think it's inconceivable at all to think he's going to add those extra few kilos to hit that mark. In fact, he's next competing at Sheffield next year. Obviously, he earned that spot by winning Worlds. And I think we are going to see 913 fall at Sheffield. The other lifter who's worth talking about here seems to be the main rival of Joey B, and that is Ade Omisakin, the guy that almost beat him at Worlds, gave him the fright of his life. Now his best total is only 861. I say only because it wasn't until recently that was literally the best in the world. That was a world record at the time. We all know his strength ceiling is higher than that though. If we look at his best lifts, 310 kilo squat, this came at IPF Worlds this year just recently. Now, Ade is someone who doesn't train super maximally, so doesn't really give us heavy singles via gym lifts. He does a lot of heavy rep work, doubles, triples, stuff like that, but don't really see top end singles from him all that much. 195 bench that he also did at Worlds this year. So he actually PB'd both of his lifts in his subtotal heading into deadlifts. However, his best deadlift that he's done to date is a 363 pull. This was done at Western Euros last year, when he put up that 861 to take the world record at the time. However, his deadlift strength is far beyond 363. So like I said, he does a lot of heavy rep work in the gym. We've seen him do 350s for sets of 3, sets of 4, which obviously suggests his strength is higher than that. But what suggests his strength is higher than that even more so are his close misses for what a deadlift world record pulls. So at Sheffield this year, he attempted the deadlift world record of 380.5 to take it away from Enaharo, and this is how close he came at Sheffield, which would have beaten Russ and Durans. He pretty much stood up with it and locked it out and just lost balance at the top. Now that would give him 885.5 if you're counting that lift, which honestly, if he would have done it in the gym, I would call that a gym PB because he did the hard work. He stood up with it. He just, I don't know what happened there at the end. And obviously at Worlds this year, when he gave Joey B the front of his life backstage, he pulled for the win with 385 kilos for a 5 kilo jump over the world record deadlift. And similar to Sheffield, he gets it almost to the top, but that time it looked like his grip gave out. And I know he's spoken about how he felt like he was blacking out at the top of that lift, which might have played into the failure there. But if you give him that pull, that's an 890 combined PB total. Now, obviously, these were missed lifts, but I think this just goes to show that Ade's top end is definitely not in the 860s, and he's definitely not in the 840s and 850s, which is what he's been totaling in his last few competitions. He's definitely up there in the high 800s, and we saw how close he came to beating Joey B, because that deadlift, like I said, would have given him 890, which would have given him the win on bodyweight. So really, he's only about 25 or so kilos off from his top end strength, which again, similar to Joey B, the rapid rate at which he's progressing, I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to do that next year at Worlds or British Nationals, or if he gets a wildcard to Sheffield, wherever he competes at next. The next 83 contender is someone who is already on this list as a 74, who I spoke about, Taylor Atwood. So Taylor Atwood totaled 876, which still stands as the second biggest 83 total of all time, behind only Joey B, who he happened to lose to that day at PA Nats. And all of his best lifts did in fact come at PA Nats. Taylor Atwood trains very submaximally. 317.5 is what he hit at Powerlifting American Nationals, 700 pound squat, a 216 kilo bench. So it's very rare for us to see top end strength, especially on singles with Taylor Atwood and his gym lifts. And even then, he hides a lot of his top sets. But a 342.5 deadlift is what he ended up with to give him that 876 total. And you can see there, nowhere near his top end. That moved very smoothly, very easily. He's done 342.5 twice now in his last 2 meets as an 83. As a 74 in that legendary performance back in 2021, he pulled 340.5. So there's no way he's only gained 2 kilos of deadlift strength in all those years since, plus moving up a weight class. Now, he did in fact attempt I think it was a 367.5 deadlift, which would have given him a 901 total to beat Joseph Borenstein. which was too much on the day. He didn't really get it off the floor. But I do think his top end deadlift is closer to 367.5 than 342.5. I think he had another 10, maybe even 15 kilos on top of that, which would have put him in the high 880s, 890s. And he is competing soon at NAPFs, and I don't think he's going to total 913 at this meet coming up, but I do think he's gunning for that IPF world record of 890 that Joe B set at Worlds, and I think he's got a pretty good shot of getting it. And finally, the last 83 contender who I think is capable of doing this within the next year is Delaney Wallace. Delaney Wallace is someone who's getting slept on as an 83 contender because obviously with the hype around Joey B, Ade, Taylor moving up a weight class, obviously Durans, there are a lot of super strong 83s right now. Delaney Wallace, because he's not, posting as much on social media as all the other people, a lot of people are looking past him. And he showed us at PA Nats when he came in third with 867.5 that he's not one to be looked past. So his best ever lifts, he actually squatted 327.5, which is a huge lift. He did that in September last year. And this is actually a full 17.5 above his best platform squat. He squatted 310 at PA Nats, missed a 320 on his third. So this is a huge leap over his best competition best. Looked pretty smooth too. He's benched 210 kilos from what I could find. Now this was actually done in October 2023, so this was a while ago. It's quite a grind too, but eventually he locks it out. He's done 207.5 on the platform in his two most recent meets, as well as missing a 210 kilo bench at SBD Rally about a year ago, which he completed. I think he got red lighted for butt lift and up down motion. So 210 is definitely capable for him. I don't know if he's done more than this. I know Delaney doesn't really show us all his top lifts, kind of similar to Taylor. And I know he's teased a lot of heavy lifts that he hasn't showed us. So I can't quite remember if he's teased a heavier bench press than 210. Although the heaviest I could find footage of anyway is 210. And the biggest deadlift he's hit is 350, which did come on the platform. This was obviously in April at PNATs, 350, which was a huge PB for him. I think before that, his best lift was only 335 or 330 in competition. Now, if you combine those individual PBs, you get an 887.5. So already in the high 880s. And he also came very close to a 355 gym lift that he did in October last year. And this almost added another 5 kilos. Gets it to just above the knees, couldn't quite lock it out. So that would have given him 892.5 on his individual lifts put together. Now again, I know that there are rumors circulating around and he's kind of teased that he's done heavier lifts than this. I remember him, I think he almost talked about a 900 kilo gym total at one point. But yeah, in terms of the footage we've seen, this is the most that I could find. But yeah, Delaney Wallace, I think, is far stronger than that 867.5, which in and of itself was a 25 kilo platform PB. I think he's got about another 25 PB in him if he has a perfect day, which isn't far off 900 at all. And he's probably not as young in the sport as someone like Ade and Joey B's. However, his progress is, if anything, looks like it's accelerated lately versus slowed down. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Delaney pushing for this total. I don't know when he's competing next. I think it'll be PNATs next year. And then we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, it could well be the case that if we don't see 913 fall at Sheffield or at PNATs with all the Americans, whichever American gets to Worlds, and obviously Ade Endurance will be there, it could well take 913 to win Worlds next year as an 83, which is insane from where the 83s were just 1 year ago. But there you have it. Those are the 83 contenders who I think could hit 913 kilos. Let me know what you think and who is going to hit it first.